Chapter 9, wherein the cavalry officer leads his newly assembled troop into battle for the first time. You squint at the reflected glory of the afternoon sun on the distant river as your hands direct the lens of your spyglass towards the wisps of Bane sign tugging at your mind. Even from a kilometer away, the Antari presence is obvious. A rough palisade surrounds a temporary camp nestled on the far side of the only bridge across the river for as far as you can see. The uncovered steel of its inhabitants' equipment glints in the reddening sun of the late afternoon. And of course, you cannot miss the residual Bane sign of 300 men camped in concentration. Well, Castleton, have our Antari friends finally found for themselves the wisdom of an expeditious withdrawal? You turn and shake your head at Cap Nelson as you fold away your field telescope. I'm afraid not, sir. We shall have to fight them after all. Very good, then. Elson turns to his own troop sergeant. Villanova, pray order the men to dismount and step into the brush. We shan't have some alert Antari officers sensing our Bane sign coming down the road. And fetch Lieutenant Casarasta from the rear guard. He favors you with a sour grin. If our dear friend Casarasta has judged the location of that ford right, then all might even go according to plan tonight. We might all live through this day yet. The captain looks at you, then at Casarasta, then back to you as the three of you stand before the head of the column. I am sure you've remembered the planned course of this upcoming action, so I shall be brief. The most dangerous role of this plan shall belong to those men who must ford the river and attack the Antari from behind. They shall be cut off, outnumbered, and fighting in darkness, as our priority is to be the complete destruction of retreating elements of the Antari force. The captain shoots a pointed look at Casarasta. I must remain behind with the bulk of our forces to set the blocking force and coordinate pursuit. I shall not force either of you to lead your men into the undue risk of leading the flanking force, but it must be done, and by one of you too. You understand what Elson is asking of you in the space of a second. You take a quick look at Casarasta, then turn back to Elson, a worried expression on your face. The captain nods. I shall need one of you to volunteer. You decide to... Do we volunteer to be the flanking force? I'd say based on our ability to be a soldier, sure, gladly. Based on the rest of what we've got with us, I don't see how this can go well. But I kind of want to see how it goes. If this succeeds, I think our soldiers will get a lot better, get a lot more experience in sort of a mission that isn't just run with everyone else and kill what's in front of you. Sure, we're volunteering. You step forward. I'll see it done, sir. Elson nods quickly, a sad little smile forming on his lips as if he thought you had no idea what he had just agreed to. The thing is, I was the one who said we'd do Casarasta's plan. The main reason for that was that I thought having a flanking force would be a good idea. So I sort of feel responsible for this, so I should be the one leading that flanking force. Very good, Castleton. Casarasta and I will remain here to await signs of your success. See to your men. Taking those words for a dismissal, you snap off a quick salute and turn away. Oh, and Castleton. Yes, sir? You turn over your shoulder. He puts on an insolent grin, a last fragment of the boyishness which he has long outgrown. Good hunting. You peer into the darkening waters of the swift stream nervously as you and your men stand at the southern bank. Even with the supposed end of the ford marked with paint by Casarasta's forward scouts, you have no idea how safe the crossing is. To ford any significantly sized body of water in broad daylight under the best possible conditions is difficult enough, but now you must manage this crossing in utter darkness while remaining undetected by the Antari sentries just 2 kilometers downstream. There are, of course, ways to make the crossing easier. You could always tie up the horses on riverbank. After all, crossing a river would be much easier if you didn't have to drag a gaggle of temperamental, easily flustered beasts along. However, the loss of the mobility which your mounts provide may prove fatal in the coming battle. You could also send a detachment of your men ahead to scout the ford, and make sure that it is both where you think it is and secure enough to cross along. It would be a time-consuming process, but it would certainly make the crossing less risky. For you, at least. After a bit of thought, you decide to... So we've got a lot of different options here. Leave the horses and have men scout. Leave the horses, don't have scouts. Take the horses, have scouts. Take the horses, have no scouts. We're not asking the staff sergeant for opinions anymore. He's not proven very, very helpful in the past. I feel like the smartest call here is taking the horses but having men scout the fort carefully. If we're already scouting the fort, we might as well take our horses with us. I think scouting the fort is something we must do. Of course, it is dangerous for the men who have to do the scouting, but, you know, who cares? They're not great soldiers. If a few of them don't make it, it's not as bad as all of us not making it. You give the order to send out a half dozen of your men on foot to probe the stream. It takes them an hour of poking and prodding with the toes of their boots and butts of their carbines, but they finally make it to the other side, shivering and none too pleased with your decision. The rest of your men take another hour to pick their way across the water, dragging their horses behind them. By the time you reach the far bank, it is nearly pitch black, with only the glowing watchfires of the Antari camp and the faint tugging on your bane-blooded mind to guide you. Your men lead their horses behind them into the woods with you at their head. Did it drop? Discipline minus 18. That's fine. Your bane sense steers you unerringly through the darkness of the forest. Dragging your reluctant mounts with you, it takes you the better part of 2 hours to guide your men through the treacherous forest. But finally, you emerge from the woods onto the road, some 500 or 600 paces from the palisade of the Antari camp. You curse your luck as you behold the red glow of the Antari watchfires down the road. You must have delayed too long at the fort or given away your position in some way to have alerted the enemy. The gate to the Antari camp is shut and the guards watching over them stand alert and ready. Now comes the difficult part. You must get your men inside the Antari camp without alerting the Antari and giving them enough time to rally. Should the enemy have the chance to bring their superior numbers to bear, you and your men would surely be trapped and cut to pieces. You decide that the best course of action would be to... use the rune gun to blast the gate off its hinges and rush in. What was that about not alerting the Antari? I mean, to be fair, it wouldn't give them enough time to rally, that's for sure, but... Basically, point is, bluffing the enemy into letting me in is not going to work. We don't have the brains to do that. Or the charisma. Shooting the sentries, scale the palisade and open the gate. I think that might not be the worst option. But if we shoot the sentries and the Antari notice, we're screwed. Because by the time we've scaled the palisade and opened the gate, they'll be ready. Use the rune gun to blast the gate off its hinges and rush in. I kind of like that option. I don't know why. This goes like against everything I would normally do in such a scenario. I'm not someone who just rushes in head first and kills everyone. But in this case, with our stats, we're blasting in. Go. You turn to your men. Stand by the order to charge. I shall only be a moment. You step forward alongside the road as the men behind you form up and ready themselves for a rapid advance. You take position 50 paces from the gate and unsling your rune gun, hoping that the pale blue glow of its bane runes do not give your position away. You load the rune gun and take up a firing position a few dozen paces from the gate. You aim carefully, hoping that the formidable destructive force of your weapon will be enough to blow the door from its hinges. Aiming carefully, you pull the trigger. There is a great thunder and flash as your weapon expends its great force upon the gates. You peer into the smoke, hoping to see the enemy's defenses surrendered. No such luck. The heavy timbers are scarred and splintered, but still intact. Damn it. Shouts of alarm ring out from the Antari camp as the watchmen on the palisade open fire at you. You hear musket balls whiz by your head, but before any can find their mark, they are silenced by the sharper cracks of dragoon-rifled carbines. You reload frantically and pray to the saints as your men give you covering fire. You half-cock, prime, empty powder, and shot into the barrel. Ram home and bring to full cock as quickly as your hands will allow you. The whole process takes little more than 20 seconds, but for you it might as well be an eternity. Finally, you bring your rune gun to bear on the crumbling gate and fire once again. This time, your enchanted weapon's deadly payload does its work. The gates splinter and fly apart in with the staccato cracks of disintegrating wood. Dragoons, mount up! Charge! Your men charge into the midst of the Antari camp, trampling men and tents underfoot in a seemingly unstoppable tide of horseflesh. It is only when you reach the center of the enemy encampment that you see the desperate knots of resistance beginning to form around you. Antari soldiers in groups of 5 or 6 are beginning to fight back with whatever weapons they have on hand. The crack of muskets sound from all sides. One of your dragoons tumbles from his saddle, a bloody crater in his chest. You must come up with a plan, and quickly. This is not gonna do, said the men leaders, hoping their individual enthusiasm will carry the day. No. Keep the men together and have them concentrate on one pocket of resistance at a time, or have the majority of my men distract the enemy while I deal with each group one at a time. 1 or 3. I'm not sure. I kind of just like to throw a coin here. Top military strategies. Throwing coins. Do I have a coin here? No, I don't. Actually, I do, yes. Give me a second. Alright. Heads is keep the men together. Tails is have the majority of my men distract the enemy. The coin fell to the floor. Give me a second. Now, there is one problem I didn't realize. I don't know whether the number is heads or tails. I think the number is tails. Is it? Or is it heads? God damn it. We're concentrating on one pocket of resistance at a time. Dragoons, form up on me. Your men quickly tighten their formation around you and follow your lead. Unfortunately, the poor discipline of your men's drill returns to haunt you at last. God damn it. With every turn you make, your formation loses a handful of dragoons to confusion or poor timing. I should have thought of that. Riding off in all directions, your men turn for your focused charge into a confused hash. The fight degenerates into a brutal melee between your mounted dragoons and the stranded Antari. Thankfully, your men have the advantage. Barely out of their beds, the Antaris are no match for alert and prepared cavalry of any quality. After a few minutes of hard fighting, the Antari resistance begins to fall apart. Desperate men begin fleeing southwards across the river. Following them are streams of panicked civilians, servants and camp followers, scattering to the winds, their legs given haste by fear and desperation. You order your men to... sack the camp. I mean, that would probably increase the loyalty of our soldiers. No. We're sacking the camp. Screw it. Dragoons, you cry, drawing the attention of every man in your troop. Take your rights of victory. A very genteel way of saying steal everything that isn't nailed down. Your men disintegrate into knots of 2s and 3s. Soldiers no more, they degenerate into the semblance of petty thieves who coincidentally wear the same color of coat. The Antari, both soldier and civilian, flee into the night, ignored by your gleefully larcenous troops. Even the staccato crack of distant musketry cannot distract your men from their pillage. You yourself do not stand idly by either. Your educated eye picks out the best furnished of the enemy tents, and you take as much Antari coinage as you can carry. Almost 75 crowns worth of gold and platinum. Ooh. Your men are still looting when Arslan and Kazarosta ride up at the head of their own dragoons. Having a bit of a sport, are we, Lieutenant? Arslan's tone is irritated, but not entirely displeased. Kazarosta, on the other hand, shoots you a most unpleasant glare. I do not know if you have noticed, Castleton, but your decision to forsake our objective for petty larceny has allowed some number of the enemy to escape, and may have... Arslan silences his subordinate with a crisp gesture of his hand. The Antari are broken, my dear Kazarosta. We shall not see them at our backs on the way south. I would consider that a fine evening's work. Shall we not allow Lieutenant Castleton and his men some small recompense for their hardships? Kazarosta has no response, save to redouble the fury of his regard. Arslan turns to you once more. I shall give you 10 more minutes of this, Lieutenant. Have your men ordered and ready to move by the end of that time. So that was actually kind of what I originally intended as my ideal plan anyway, which was don't kill all of the Antari, don't kill civilians and stuff like that, but do go for a flank. So I'm quite happy with how that turned out, and we got some gold as well. Once the squadron's dead are burned, once those dragoons wounded in the evening's fighting have been dressed, and those of your men still fit to ride are assembled for the long slog back south, you finally have the time to reflect upon the day's engagement. Your men have done well enough in what for many was their first taste of battle. However, the men which you left in that bloody clearing weighed heavily on your minds still. Despite this, the many men still with you seem to have more faith in your competence, either out of genuine respect or simple relief that you have led them out of battle alive. Those men you and the rest of the squadron have lost this night will surely be replaced, but by new recruits of even more dubious spirits and quality. It is clear that the war is wearing the king's army down bit by bit, as dozens of minor engagements like the one which you have just fought continue to sap the strength of His Majesty's regiments. Eventually there will be a breaking point. Tierra will have no more men to send, no more supplies to feed them, and no more treasure with which to pay them. You cannot imagine what would happen to you and your fellow soldiers stranded in a foreign land should that unthinkable point be passed. Hopefully, the war will end before you find out. It's a long night's ride back to the camp in the ruins of the old monastery. Awaiting you is a courier bearing a message from the Duke of Cunaris himself. Your squadron is to be recalled to Norinja, to join the Duke of Wolfram's army.